Hi, my name is Madeline, and today I'm going to be explaining a little bit about the cerebral cortex of our brain and the four lobes and their functions. So our brain is made up of two hemispheres, a left and a right, and encompassing these hemispheres are thin layers of approximately 20 to 30 billion nerve cells and about 300 trillion synaptic connections. And these numbers might not mean a lot to you, but it makes us uniquely human. If you were to compare an amphibian or even a smaller mammal, you would see that our cerebral cortex is way more advanced and way more complex, which allows for advanced capabilities in learning and thinking and gives us the ability to adapt to things such as the world is ever changing, so is our brain because of our cerebral cortex. So on both left and right hemispheres, there's a cerebral cortex. And each of these, each hemisphere has four lobes. There's a frontal, a parietal, an occipital, and a temporal lobe on each side. The frontal lobes is going to be the part of the cerebral cortex that lies right behind your forehead. This is going to deal with muscles, movements, speaking, making plans, and judgments. When damaged, the frontal lobe, it can get damaged. And when this happens, your personality and your judgment can alter, which sometimes is a big thing for people that get in accidents or any kind of type of damage. Really, it kind of can change who they are. The parietal lobe is going to be at the top and toward the back, and those receive sensory input for touch and body positions. The occipital lobes are at the back of the head, and they're the areas that receive information from visual fields. And this is kind of interesting. When you get into the left and the right hemisphere, you think that you're either left-brained or right-brained, but you're both of the hemispheres and both lobes in each hemisphere kind of work together in a cool type of way where although I think that what I'm seeing out of my right eye goes right from my right eye into back to like the right side of my brain, and that's how it's all acknowledged, it's kind of opposite. And the things that I see out of my left and right eye send sensories and send it to the opposite lobes, which then get the sensory, process the information, and send it back so that I can see what I'm seeing out of my two eyes. However, it goes flip-flops to the opposite lobe. And so that's pretty interesting, and it kind of goes along with the same idea with the temporal lobes, which are right above the ears, and that includes like the auditory, so hearing, and you receive information from the opposite ear. So again, it's not like your left lobe, left temporal lobe is working only for your left ear and your right only for your right. Kind of, they share, they coordinate. You need both to kind of make it all work. So those are the four main lobes. Well, those are the four lobes that are separated by different fissures in each of the cerebral cortexes for each hemisphere. We also have some different areas in the brain that control different things in the cerebral cortex. So the motor cortex is at the rear and of the frontal lobes, and it controls like voluntary movements. So when someone was stimulated, like the stimulation happened, it causes movement on the opposite side of the body, which is kind of again what I was explaining with the seeing and the hearing and how both hemispheres work with both sides of the brain and everything. Again, that's the whole gist, that the myth of left and right is not a thing. So these areas that the motor cortex deals with is areas that require precise controls, such as your fingers or your mouth. And so the opposite sides of the brains control the opposite limbs. So my left motor cortex controls my right side of my body, my right arm. I'm left-handed, but it doesn't mean that I'm left-brained. My right motor cortex controls my left limbs. So a lot of times when scientists were figuring this out, they would do some type of stimulation on, let's say, an animal or something's like right limb, and it would light up in the left part of the motor cortex in the frontal lobe. We also have a somatosensory, sorry for my pronunciation, cortex, and that's going to be front of the parietal lobes, and that registers and processes body touch and movements. So I think this is one of the more interesting sections of the cerebral cortex. Different areas can make people feel touched in different ways and stimulate different reactions in this cortex. So more sensitive body regions get more space in the somatosensory cortex. So an example would be that as humans, you kiss someone goodbye and you feel that sensory, and you have that just the acknowledgement in your brain that the kiss is with touch, and you get the sensories, you feel pleasure from it or whatever. And so your lips have more space taken up in this part of your cortex than, let's say, your toe. I don't give my boyfriend my toe before he leaves for work every day or before I leave for work. Your brain has a space in it made to know that that is the area that's sensitive, so that's why we do it. There's also going to be areas of the cerebral cortex that aren't involved in any motor functions or sensory functions at all. And this is called the association areas. And although they're not dealing with motor or sensory functions, they are dealing with more thinking and higher mental functions. So remembering, learning, speaking, the things that I'm doing right now, remembering things, learning about the cerebral cortex happened in my associated areas. That space is made up for that. However, this is one of the one places in the cerebral cortex that cannot be mapped. It is a space that when scientists tried to stimulate or figure out a way to map these areas, that it was just all so much like everywhere that it couldn't be mapped. You can't designate a specific space that the associated areas are. There's also one more part of the frontal lobe, and that's the prefrontal cortex. And this enables judgment, planning, and social interactions, and helps create new memories. And that kind of just goes along with the frontal lobe's main idea of speaking, muscle movements, all of this. This goes along and helps with that. So again, frontal lobe damage, because of all of the things that the frontal lobe does. I mean, it helps you make plans, judge, speak, and talk. So when it can alter your personality and remove inhibitions, and it can change people, which I think is really interesting. There's a lot of articles and a lot of things in our textbook even or online that you can see the damage that the frontal lobe, or even to any other part of this frontal cortex too, that can really change who you are as a human. And I think that it's very interesting how our brain, although there is two hemispheres and we tend to just divide our body left and right, that even though we have a left eye, left ear, right ear, our brain is divided left and right, but still coordinates together, and it all kind of functions as one. So I hope that explains a little bit more about the cerebral cortex. Again, the four lobes and the association area and the motor cortex and the different functions and space that it takes up in our brain, but all of the cool and complex things that it can do in just still a thin layer of cells, and all that it helps us do. And it's very interesting how my cerebral cortex helped me present this to you. So I hope that you learned a little bit. I know I learned a lot making this poster, so I hope this helps. Have a great day.